Hi, I'm Ian, and welcome to Ghosts and Bears, the podcast where we tell you the actual ghost story with the actual history in the actual place. This week we're heading off to Helmcken House, and we're going to learn about the three spirits who remain, what they want, why they're still there, and we're going to talk to our friend Andrea about what she experienced there firsthand. Coming up on Ghosts and Bears. Thank you so much for coming back. I am thrilled that you're back with us again after our first episode was so well received, and thank you for that, by the way. We are going to be talking about our friends, the Helmkins, again, and no, I am not stalking them. It was just that when I mentioned to Andrea I really wanted to have her on, she said, "Ooh, I'm free this weekend," and that's kind of how it went. I knew she had a great story because Andrea had shared that with me when I was writing the book, so it was important that we get her voice on here. Following up from last week, a couple of things. First of all, I was right. The people of British Columbia to join Canada pretty much wanted a railroad and forgiveness of debt. So it's kind of cool to see that some things never change. The forgiveness of debt part. Really grateful that Andrea could join us. Really grateful that you enjoyed the first episode. And even more intriguing, when we went there with Andrea, we actually had something happen while we were there, probably because Andrea was there. Andrea is a bona fide paranormal investigator. I'm more of a paranormal runner-awayer. So, I was glad that we were outside the house when all that went down. Before we get into that, though, I had the very cool experience of getting an email from someone last week, and she was sharing with me a family member's experience in Helmkin Alley. So I thought I'd share that with you now. Kate emailed in and was telling me how she had her dad have an experience in Helmkin Alley, and it was not quite what you'd expect. So I'm going to read what she sent. Backstory. My parents took my two kids on an epic journey across Canada on the train from Toronto to Vancouver in late June of 2006. My husband and I flew to Seattle and drove to BC to meet them. We spent about 2 or 3 days in Victoria, and we finished our trip back on Washington's Pacific coast and on Bainbridge Island before all of us flying out of Seattle back to Western New York. I think all told, my parents and kids were traveling for about 16 days. My father started the journey here at home with a very sore and achy hip, really the beginning of what's now chronic hip back pain. The boarding and disembarking of the train at stops across the country and various other activities of sightseeing in BC had him in agony by the time we got to Victoria. But being my dad, he just soldiered on. He, my mom, my daughter, and I participated in a ghost walk in Victoria on our second night here. I have a thing for ghosts and ghost stories, and my dad and I are both pretty sensitive. My mom and I were a little concerned about my dad walking at night on an already hurting hip, but he assured us he'd be fine and more than likely grumbled at us to stop fussing. The ghost walk was fun and informative, albeit disappointing for me because I didn't sense or feel a thing anywhere. Don't worry, it's kind of confusing when there's that much energy going on. My father, though, told us as we walked back to the hotel from the tour's end that as we stood in Helmkin Alley listening to the guide talking about its resident ghosts, he felt something come up to him and push on his hurting hip, like physically push on him. Not to knock him down, but a pressure. When the pressure went away, the hip pain was gone. Gone. He didn't have any more pain for the rest of the trip, and actually for a couple of years afterwards. Dad wondered if he'd been visited by the doctor himself as he stood there. He was pretty gobsmacked about the whole thing, but also very grateful for whatever it was that did whatever it did. That weird experience in the alley in Victoria enabled my dad to actually finish this trip without pain. Pretty amazing. I wonder if any of your fellow guides or visitors have ever had any similar healing experiences in the alley. Thank you so much, Kate. that was amazing. I have never heard of that in Helmkin Alley. I would love to hear about anybody else's experiences. And honestly, if you've had an experience about anywhere we've talked about on the show, I know it's just like episode 2, but there'll be more, I promise. But if you've had an experience in one of these places, I would love to hear about it. I'm more than happy to read your experience in a follow-up episode. And I think that would be amazing to share that with everybody else. I really do. I find that when we share things like this, it just brings a lot of comfort to other people, even me, because at times you experience things and you think, did I really experience that though? Or, was it something else? And so it's really great when you have someone else back up something you felt or you've experienced or you're feeling. And I would love it if people want to do that as well. So thank you so much, Kate, for being our first writer-inner. I am thrilled about that. And I do hope we get more people's experiences. And if we can, hey, we will read them on the show. Now on with this episode's focus. So, we're talking about Helmcken House, and Helmcken House is on the grounds of the British Columbia Museum here in Victoria, down in the Inner Harbor. It is in its original spot. What has grown up around it is the museum and all the other buildings, but that little cabin is still there. Dr. Helmcken started out life in England. He was born in 1824. He learned to be sort of apprenticed to be a physician and a pharmacist, and probably looking for adventure, he joined up with the Hudson's Bay Company and got set off on his first voyage in 1847. There was a time spent in York Factory, which is in which is in Manitoba, the middle of the country. And after he had done his time there, he was persuaded to move on. He was going to join the Navy after this, but he was persuaded to move on with the Hudson's Bay Company. And in 1849, he was stationed on Vancouver Island. Now, this was a really long trip to take from Manitoba all the way around to British Columbia. You had to go down and sail past the Horn around South America and back up the coast. There was no other way of crossing the country. And on the long journey, there was a bout of smallpox that broke out on the ship, which in anybody else's hands would probably have meant death for everyone on board. But Dr. Helmcken apparently handled it really, really well. And only one person died. And this was certainly noted. He arrived on Vancouver Island in 1850 and was posted up to Fort Rupert, where he was made a magistrate. He was involved in sort of all those decisions and keeping people accountable, as well as being the doctor. But he also wanted to head off down island and come to Victoria. He was dispatched to Fort Victoria by the governor, who was Richard Blanchard at the time. And he was sent to take care of Richard Blanchard, who died. Oops, it's going to happen. And James Douglas was then made the governor of the colony. Then in 1852, he married the governor's daughter, as we had mentioned, Cecilia, and kind of effectively secured his permanent post with Fort Victoria. He went on in 1856 to be elected to the Legislative Assembly and represent Esquimalt. And as I had mentioned in the last episode, in 1866, he set off to go to Ottawa to join the Confederation talks in Ottawa to become part of Canada. And as I said, what they wanted was a railroad all the way across to BC so that there was a nice a nice connection, and also they wanted debt forgiveness. This is really what they wanted. He was asked to go on and become a senator. He was offered the post to run as premier and lieutenant governor, and he said no. And basically his answer, or his reason for saying no, was, I don't want to be in a job where I have to be nice to everybody just so they'll vote for me. I want to be able to speak my mind. I want to be able to do what's right. And so I'm refusing all those positions. So you got to give the guy some credit. He was a man of principle, and he was a good guy. He served public service. He served for many, many years. And he died in Victoria at the age of 1996. He built that house, as I said, in 1852, lived there with Cecilia, where all sorts of things occurred there. Cecilia and John were married. They built their little house very close to the governor's house because Cecilia wanted to be near her father. They ended up having 7 children. Douglas, Catherine, Margaret, James, Henry, Edith, also known as Dolly, and Cecil. Sadly, only 4 of the 7 children lived to adulthood. The other 3 passed away in the house as babies. And as you hear in the story segment, they ended up burying those babies in the backyard of their home. They just couldn't bear the thought of them being too far away. Cecilia died quite early. She died at the age of 31 in 1865, and it broke John's heart. He was not okay with this. He never married again, even though he lived to quite a ripe old age and had children to care for. And he didn't move on from her. He always adored Cecilia. It was one of the reasons he wouldn't leave. He wouldn't leave the house. He had to stay living in the house. As he aged, it got to the point where he couldn't take care of himself anymore. He couldn't take care of the house. So Dolly, one of the daughters, moved in. Dolly only moved in because, John was quite stubborn. He didn't feel he needed electricity, or he didn't need any fancy things like that, or indoor plumbing. And Dolly basically put her foot down and said, well, I will, move in and take care of you, but I'm not living in that cabin. We're going to have to do something different. And so they built on to the actual cabin. It's quite striking when you see the pictures. There's the original little log cabin. There's a small kind of 2-story addition. And then you've got what would be termed back then as a modern home tacked on the edge of it. There was a dividing door because Dolly and John both wanted their privacy. As well, John enjoyed smoking cigars, which Dolly found rather disgusting. And so he would smoke his cigars in his end of the house with the door shut, and Dolly would have her end of the house with its electric lights and plumbing and all those good things. They carried on this way for quite some time. As I say, John eventually died when he was 96, and he left behind quite the legacy. It also seems he never quite left the house. Dolly also lived in the house until she died. She never did marry, so she stayed in the house. And the other siblings would often come back to the family home for visits, Christmas time, these sorts of things. They would bring their children, which I mentioned one of the stories in the story time about their experience in the house as well. But now, as I mentioned, the house itself is part of the BC Museum. And the problem is that it appears that 3 members of the household never left. Actually more, but the children have only ever been sighted in the window. They haven't really been experienced. But it's John and Dolly and Cecilia who are still there. They don't just sort of protect the house either. They're quite protective of the grounds around the house. Many security guards have said they don't want to be in that house by themselves, and especially not at night, because they know full well they're not alone. Just after we finished recording the story time with Andrea, a security guard came around and said hello to us, and we said hello back, a young guy. And we said, hey, just wondering, have you ever experienced anything odd in this house? And he looked a little bit uncomfortable, but he said, well, I would rather not be in here. He said, I've had lights turn off on me, and I've seen the floorboards and heard the floorboards creaking as if somebody was walking towards me, and I've actually seen them go down, but then there's nobody there. People who visited the house as part of their museum experience have also had their own run-ins, most likely with Cecilia. She's sometimes depends on her mood. There was a culture of looting when Victoria was in its wild phase, and so she seems to question why people are there or what they're doing. But sometimes she's in a better mood, and she has actually given tours of the upstairs of the house. People will say, oh, a very nice lady in a long blue dress showed us around upstairs, pointed out the bedrooms. And of course, the poor security guard who's based at the bottom level of the house is like, yeah, there's nobody up there. People have seen actually the impression of someone sitting down on the bed while looking in Cecilia's room. So Cecilia's definitely still keeping watch over her house. Dolly also has been experienced. She's a little more severe, a little more no nonsense. She will come out on the porch and kind of glare at people as if she doesn't want them around. And John, he seems to stay at his end of the house only. People experience him, they'll smell the cigar smell as if someone has just lit a cigar. Sometimes people will feel touches on their body, taps, almost around their wrist, almost as if someone's taking their pulse. So perhaps John is still trying to do the work he did for his whole life. I believe Cecilia is probably there because she died in the house. She died quite young. She probably doesn't feel like she can leave her children. Dolly, well, that's just the sense of duty Dolly had. She was brought in to look after her father in the house, and by golly, that's what she's going to do. And as for John, I don't think he ever wanted to leave in the first place. His beloved wife Cecilia had been there for so many years, and he'd been without her, but kept her memory alive by staying there, and he has no intention of leaving now. It's quite the house, and it's quite the grounds, as you will discover in story time. But it's important not to forget the people behind the story. John Helmkin had a massive impact on British Columbia, the future of British Columbia, as well as not just on the province, but on the country. And was a pretty important guy. We're very lucky that we have access to this house, that it survived as long as it has. And it's pretty neat that the three of them are still there and are still sharing their energy with the rest of us. We'll get on to story time now, and you will get to hear Andrea's experience with the house, as well as hear some of the stories we tell on the ghost walks. And you'll even be there firsthand when we have a little bit of an encounter of our own. Here we go. All right. Thank you so much for being with us for the story segment of this week's episode. I'm Ian. I'm here with
Jason,
and Andrea Bailey, who's with us. And Andrea, tell us how I came to know you. Through what organization?
Well, my group is called Unearthing Shadows Paranormal, and I'm the founder and lead investigator. And through the community, we just kind of started becoming instant BFFs.
And Andrea's one of the places where if people are having problems in their house or whatever, I'm usually very comfortable, always comfortable to refer them to Andrea. I say usually because in case they're creepy, I don't want to put them on you. But no, it's great because Andrea and her team are great investigators, and we've done a lot of fun things together. And when I mentioned to Andrea, because this is one of the first places we talked about was Helmcken House, which is where we are, right in the heart of Victoria. I've done all the history in the previous segment, and I'm going to try and refrain from repeating myself, but there's no promise because I get on a roll. But Andrea, the house is here. You can very clearly see the 3 generations of the house. Talk to me about your experiences here. What did you experience here?
Well, I think my first experience was I actually just worked the building behind here. So I used to come and sit in the courtyard here at lunch, and I just found it a very peaceful place generally. So what started off was I would always get a glimpse of a man in the garden here behind us.
Right,
and
yeah.
I would turn around thinking somebody was there. There was nobody there.
Oh, wow.
And this started happening more and more frequently, like feeling like somebody was walking up to me, not malicious or anything, negative. It was just more somebody taking care of the garden is what I thought was happening.
Yeah.
And nothing ever happened. I tried taking a few photos, had some weird, unusual things happening in the photos that I can't really connect to. So that's kind of what started it. And then one night, a friend of mine, we were here downtown one night. We were of sober, sound mind, just to point that out.
Which is not always the case.
Not always the case,
downtown, no.
but that's why I thought I should point that out. But I had just told him I had been experiencing some things here. And we were walking here, and we just happened to be on the porch, and he was like, oh my gosh, and he pulled up his sleeves, and he had like almost like these large needle marks all the way up his arm.
Oh, wow.
And scratches and the back of his neck, like to the point where it wasn't like bleeding bad, but just when you get a little scratch and that kind of thing. And he was just like, I need to get out of here. And I kept getting visions of this woman. To me, she was heavier set, dark hair.
Yeah.
And he mentioned the same. So he was like, I need to get out of here. And he's used to the paranormal. So for him, it was a bit not like him to say, let's go.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. And then it was about 2 weeks after that, I had mentioned that to two of my girlfriends. And we came here with some equipment. And instantly I was like, there's a woman in the window.
Oh, wow.
And
same woman? Like the same one you saw before?
I felt like, from what I recalled, that's what I saw. And we all ran up to the window, and then eventually they were commenting the same thing. But it wasn't really a positive experience at this point. It just was like, go away. It felt somewhat medical, like.
So almost as if you guys were intruding on the house.
Kind of. So we took a few pictures, and we did get a few hits on our K2, and on the pendulum seemed to be really reactive. The dowsing rods as well, and it all pointed to go. So we thought we would be respectful, and we left.
When there's multiple signs telling you to leave, it's time to go.
And again, like, we always try to be respectful. And it was a couple of weeks after that, I was sitting here again in the courtyard. And the building, this isn't open like in regular non-COVID times.
Yeah. I should give you a little context here. So this house is part of the BC Museum now, and I think like regular like weekends or something they open it up, but very rarely. I've been inside it twice because whenever I come here, it's never open. But it is actually part of your admission to the museum.
Absolutely, and it is a fantastic place. It's very interesting.
It really is.
But at the time, it was closed, and I actually hadn't even been inside. When I've lived here pretty much my whole life, never seen the inside. But I saw a woman in the window again.
Oh, wow.
And one of the security guards I kind of was familiar with, I just said, hey, I'm like, is there anybody in there right now? And the window, especially in front of us, so that window the drapes kept moving a bit, and then in that window over there, I kept seeing a face of a woman.
Oh, in the newest part of the house.
Yes,
right.
And so the guard was kind of like, "There's nobody in here. It's locked." And I'm like, "I'm positive there's somebody in there." So I wasn't allowed in, but he went and searched the whole thing. And he came out. He's like, "There's nobody in there." So
wow.
Yeah, it was maybe about a month and a half after this, they finally opened this up. So me and the gentleman that I was telling you about, we're like, let's go check it out. As soon as we walked into the main part here, against the windows, there was a picture, and it was of Cecilia. And I was like,
wow.
Oh my gosh. I'm like, that's her who I saw. And his face just went white. He was like, me too.
Okay.
And then we went to the back room where they had all the medical equipment, and he almost passed out. He was like, I have to go. And he started getting the marks on his arm, the same arm. Again. And he showed me before we went in, there was no marks on his arm, so I can verify that.
Was that, do you think, like a get out of here kind of thing, or like a medical test kind of thing, or like what was going on?
We talked about it a lot. We both felt more like it was a procedure. Like, we didn't, even I've had a few experiences and with him as well. We didn't feel like anybody was like purposely like, I'm going to try to hurt you. It was more of, get away from here, or I'm just very stern and trying to do these procedures on you. Right.
So it was somebody who was just very serious about what they were doing.
It seemed that way, yeah.
Wow.
So I don't know for sure, but it did look to me exactly like the photo here of Cecilia.
Yeah. Jason?
Yes.
You've been here before with me. What is your impression of this building? Like, do you get anything off of it?
Yeah, I felt a lady's apparition staring at me when you were talking to your tour group about it.
From like one of these windows?
Yeah. The windows on the lighter section of the house, yes.
Yeah.
Almost as if it felt like we were violating their space and trespassing, and that would make a certain amount of sense. As she was talking, I was considering the fact that at the time there was a lot of looting in this town. So I am wondering if she was suspect of our intentions around the property.
As if she's extra protective.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Yeah. That's what I felt. And I didn't feel welcomed. The house doesn't have a nice feel to it. It does feel a bit forlorn.
Yeah.
The atmosphere seems almost melancholy.
Yeah.
Despite its beauty and the surrounding fauna, trees, the Douglas, what are they called? Gary Oaks.
Oh,
They're
yeah,
Gary
giant
Oaks.
Gary Oaks.
They're beautiful, but they have a bit of a menacing characteristic about them, and the fact that they surround this property adds to the character and the drama, and the sense of
Just left
forlorn.
alone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, it's interesting you say that. You'll see the pictures because Jason's taken some awesome pictures, and I'm going to use one of them of the full house as sort of the cover picture of this episode, so you'll know the house we're talking about. We're also going to upload some stuff onto YouTube. And for any of our members and Buy Me a Coffee, you actually get a whole spread of Jason's photos from being here today. But the way the house is built, there's on the far, we're on the facing the house, and on the far right hand side there's 2 windows, a door, and another window, and that roof line is of a certain height, and that was the original house. And then when Dr. Helmkin got married, they began to have kids, obviously. They had 7 kids. Sadly, only 4 of them lived, but they added on to the house. So they added this funny little it's kind of like an extra story, same sort of outside, the cedar shingles on the outside, but it's a story taller than the rest of the house. And then, weirdly enough, you've got this whole end with this almost modern, wouldn't you say, like comparatively?
Definitely.
Modern home on the end. And I remember seeing this for the first time without knowing any history and thinking, okay, that's weird. But there is actually a story behind it. The main story I've told you about who lived here and who kind of remains here was in the history section, the 3 specific people who seem to still be here. But the best story, I think, one of them that we tell on the Ghost Walk is about Dolly. Dolly, as you know, is the daughter of Dr. Helmkin, and she did not want to leave her dad alone in the house. She didn't feel like he could be left alone in the house. So he agreed that she could move in with him, but he didn't want her changing everything. He didn't want modern conveniences. He didn't need electricity. He didn't need indoor plumbing. Well, Dolly was of a different mind. And so Dolly had the house on the end with the brown, with the modern windows and modern build and porch and all these good things. It had things in it like electricity and, plumbing, crazy luxuries, spoilt kids these days. And in return, Dolly respected her father's privacy, as he lived well into his 90s, as you know. He'd been alone for a very long time. His wife died very young. We talked about her before. So he would smoke his cigars in his end of the house, and Dolly, who found that kind of disgusting, would stay in her end of the house, the nice new part, the big 2-story lovely house. It was Christmas time here in Victoria. Of course, the Helmkin family long gone. But something the museum wanted to do was they wanted to take advantage of this house. So what they decided to do was they were going to produce a little play. It would only run for 10 nights during the Christmas season, and it was going to be an old-time Victoria Christmas, and it was going to be based on the Helmkin family. So they auditioned all these actors to come. And did you see something move?
The curtains moved. Sorry, in the door here on the new part, the curtains like fully on moved. Sorry.
Wow, that is so cool. Oh, no, it's amazing. I'm feeling such a... Yep. Yeah, I do see.
And I can't
Do you see in here?
there, but there you can definitely...
Yeah. They're very curious about what we're doing out here.
Sorry to interrupt.
It's okay. No, Dolly will probably love this story. So they hired a bunch of actors. And actors, as you know, can often be a little desperate for jobs. And so when they asked the woman who was auditioning to be Dolly, she was perfect. She looked like her. She sounded like her. They were thrilled. She had the same almost personality. So they asked her, "Can you play the piano?" And like most actors, she's like, "Sure." You're like, "Will it get me the job? Because if so, yeah, I can play the piano." She could not play the piano. That's the spoiler here. But she figured all she had to do was play Silent Night. At the very end of the play, that's where it came in. The family gathered around the piano, and the woman, pretending to be Dolly, played Silent Night. Because Dolly, that's what she would make the family do when they came over. They would have sing-alongs. So they got into rehearsals. They got deep into the rehearsals, and they were going through them as you do. And of course, they'd get to the part where they're like, and then Dolly plays Silent Night, and they'd all just sing it because, of course, this woman can play the piano. It wasn't until they got almost to the dress rehearsals and they were going along and they said to this woman, "Okay, so we're going to need you to play it so we know what it's going to sound like and we'll all gather around. And she sat down and she put her hands on the keyboard and she burst into tears. She couldn't do it. She was not musical. She couldn't learn it. And so they ended up panicked a little bit. The director and the producer were like, what are we going to do? Well, they got this woman private piano lessons, intensive private piano lessons, and she swore she would not leave until she had the tune. She would practice here in the house, and she practiced hours, and honestly, she couldn't do it. She could barely pick the tune out with one hand. So it was too late to find a replacement actress who could play the piano. So they basically said, listen, here's what we're going to do. You're going to play the one chord, learn the opening chord. That's all you have to do. And all the actors are going to sing so loud, no one's going to notice you're not actually playing the piano. So this was the plan. First night rolled around. She got no better over the next few days of practicing, but at least she could hit that opening chord. Opening night rolled around. Everyone was going through the play. It was lovely. All the customers, the audience was completely entranced. And then they got to the infamous part where the actress playing Dolly had to play the Silent Night song. She sat down at the piano. Everyone gathered around. She lifted her hands. She played the opening chord. And as everyone started to sing, the big shock came when she proceeded to play it flawlessly. Beautifully. One of the most spectacular arrangements of this song that has ever been heard. The cast almost lost their groove. They were so shocked this music was coming out of this woman's hands into the piano. They got to the end of it. They all took their bows. The audience left. The cast was left alone. And they basically turned to this woman and said, wow, great joke. You know, like you spring that out on us. Are you kidding me right now? And the woman was noticeably shaken. And she said, no, I don't know what happened. She put her hands on the piano to play the opening chord, and she said it felt like something took over her arm and her hand from the elbows down, and she was able to play this fantastic arrangement of Silent Night.
Oh, wow.
Wildest part of this, she was able to do it every night for the 10 nights. But if she sat down to do it and it wasn't a performance, it wouldn't happen. She couldn't do it. Theory is, Dolly. There is no way Dolly was going to be embarrassed in her own house by someone representing her. And she just took that energy and she went with it. Have you heard that story before?
Yeah, you did say that. I was going to point out some interesting facts that I knew about Cecilia. When they got married, she was young. She was 26 and only died 4 years later. And it's befitting of the house's structure because the original cabin was built in 1852, the year that they got married in December. And interestingly, phase 2 of the house, the second part, was added 4 years later in 1856, ironically the year she died of pneumonia in December.
Right.
And then he went on to create the third stage of this house in 1883, which is the most mammoth part.
Yeah,
definitely. But there could be some insight into how she felt cheated of her life, being married to a doctor and still dying, ironically enough, at a young age at 30.
That's a really good point, and I think that's one of the reasons why she's still here. Would you not agree?
I would agree with that. I mean, that's kind of maybe a little bit of the sense when me and that gentleman were here too, like just anger, upset, and why wasn't I fixed, but I'm going to try to fix you.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the interesting part. Like, Dr. Helmkin never did remarry. He spent the rest of his life single. And I'm sure that went through his head too. Like, here he is a doctor and he couldn't even save his wife, who he adored. It wasn't just that they were this, arranged marriage thing of the 1800s. He adored her. So the fact that Dolly and his wife Cecilia and himself are still here, I'm not that surprised. We're going to go around to the back of the house now because I got a little bit of a story there for you guys. Let's go. Okay, so now we're at the back of the house. And of course, this is the oldest part of the house. And I got a couple things to tell you. I was on a ghost walk with one of our guides, and she took a picture of that upstairs window there, which Jason will take a picture of as well so you can see what I'm talking about. And I finished telling the stories and we moved on, and she comes running up to me and she goes, "Do you see it? Do you see it?" And you could very clearly see 3 little faces at the window, without a doubt. And that was, I didn't know he'd had 3 children who died. So that was actually a big shock. They ended up buried right here in the backyard where we are. They did move the bodies to the new graveyard, but he and his wife could not bear to be separated from the kids, and so they buried them here in the backyard, which is part of the reason, you know, you mentioned seeing an old man back here, right?
A few times, yeah.
Yeah, and he loved this garden. This garden meant everything to him. The other piece of news that we got was the Helmkin family still, of course, has distant members here. And one of the very now elderly uncles was saying that whenever they would go to a family dinner and they would come here, all the parents would go out and leave them with Aunt Dolly. She would sort of babysit. And she kept the log cabin part of the house. And she would always say to them, okay, kids, come on, we're going to go say hi to your grandfather. And the kids hated it because he'd been dead for quite a while, but they would go in there and they could smell the cigars and they could hear someone moving around in the back of the cabin because of course it had no electricity. But she would scare the crap out of them by making them go through the divider door. And I know, right? Can you imagine as a kid, I'd be like, yeah, I'm sick, I'm staying home.
Kind of like her.
Yeah. But she was so proud of this house, just as her father was. She spent her entire life here. She died here. So the fact that the two, I would say, major forces here are Dr. Helmkin, because he never wanted to go anyway, his wife Cecilia, who was taken away way too early, and Dolly, who really knew nothing else. This was her whole life, this house and everything about it. Do you have any other impressions before we end our little story time here?
Impressions, I just find this place, like, it's such a gorgeous home. Like, it's just intriguing, but I just really just love the different energies here. Like, again, the contrast of the house, that's a little bit more stay away from my house kind of, and out here in the garden where it's just peaceful. So in such a short distance, that's always intrigued me.
Kind of crazy because it feels so much more welcoming here.
Definitely.
There's been people who've walked up onto the outer porch when we've been doing ghost walks, and you watch them seriously one at a time just kind of ease off the porch so that by the time you're done telling stories, there's nobody on the porch. It's pretty wild. How about you, Jay? Did you pick anything up while we were here?
Yeah, I think that the energy is still questioning our presence.
Our intentions, maybe?
Yeah, and we're not threatening in any way. And I think, Andrea's right. There is a complete juxtaposition to the peacefulness of the garden right against the house. Yeah. And the house just stands so distant in time compared to the surrounding structures. Everything is so new. You got so much going on, a whole bunch of new builds in this part of town, and it just stands alone, almost unsettled. There's this much change.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Across the way is the first schoolhouse in Victoria run by the Nuns, and this is totally just a bonus fun fact. These poor nuns were brought out from Quebec, the St. Anne's nuns, and they were the Sisters of St. Anne. They were told they were coming to run a school for the 300-member fort of Fort Victoria. And when they got here, because it took a real long time to sail all the way to Victoria from Quebec, when they got here, they discovered the gold rush had happened, and they now had a town of 30,000 people that they were suddenly in charge of. So bless their hearts, because those nuns started the local hospital. They started our local school system. Like, they were taking care of the elderly. So yeah, that's kind of neat. And it's funny because Helmcken House is always the big draw, and we kind of forget that building's there and just how important that was to our history as well.
Absolutely. And it's a really great place to visit. You'll kind of, if you go in there and look around, you're probably going to catch a glimpse of a nun walking by. That's a pretty common story there. And I don't know. I think it's a really important piece of history of Victoria. So
we should do an episode on the old nunnery. Because that place is so crazy haunted. And I've got about 100 stories about that place. So we definitely should do that one. The last one we're going to end off on is, the back porch over here on the edge of the house. We come up that way from downtown to do the ghost walk. And we've had times when little kids have said they'll start waving at the house. And parents are like, what are you doing? Like, there's nobody there. Because we're here, kind of late. And they're like, no, there's a lady in a blue dress and she's waving at me on the porch, a long blue dress. That's how they talk about her. And I can pretty much guarantee that's our friend Dolly, who, like I said, never wanted to leave the house anyway.
Aw, I really really love the stories about Dolly. I've heard a lot of very pleasant ones about a younger woman, and just always at that end of the house. So
Always at that end of the house. And you know, if you know why she had it built, you understand why she's hanging out at the other end, right?
totally, it's a fantastic place.
All right. Well, thanks for the story time. We're going to head back in. I hope you enjoy all the stories. Thank you, Andrea,
Oh, you're welcome. Thank
for
you.
being here.
Thanks
Oh,
for
no.
inviting me.
Always good to see you. I'm sure we'll be hearing from Andrea again in some other episodes. We've got some good stories coming. I actually totally sketched out every episode until the end of December. I'm that mature geek, so just so you know. And Jay, do you want to say anything before we sign off this segment?
Yeah, I think this is interesting. Another interesting fact is one of the children's actually buried out here,
Yeah.
right by the hollies. So
Oh, is it still here?
I don't know. The grave is marked.
Oh. We always tell ghost walk people that the bodies are maybe they weren't. We always tell people, oh, they buried their children here, and then you wait a beat and you're like, but don't worry, they moved them. But if there's a grave
Maybe
marker
they
here,
didn't it? I don't know.
maybe they didn't. All right. Well, thanks for that fun little fact, Jay.
Fascinating.
That'll help the children sleep at night. All right. Take care. Thanks for being with us. And thank you, Andrea, so much for taking the time to hang out with us and do those stories. And it was just a lot of fun. And I hope you enjoyed them too. We do have some great pictures in our Buy Me a Coffee section for all those super friends who were $5 and up contributors. You know, just saying. Speaking of, sweet baby Jesus, you people, you've been amazing. I had announced that Arwen and Tammy were the very first, and I had a sad suspicion, perhaps the only people who were going to help us out, because this gets expensive, as I'm finding out, who were going to support us. But guess what? Nope, you guys are coming through, and I am so grateful. So I'm going to attempt to read everyone else's name on here. And if I get your name wrong, I'm really sorry. You can tell me. I can handle it. I'm a grown-up. So I'd also want to thank Ginger Manatee, Danny, Sarah, Tori, Christy, Steve, Mari, Brianna, Melinda, Aaron, Evan, Dixie Koga, Jen, Leslie, Kathleen, Pabakopu, Rebecca, Kyle, Sandy, Jordan, Michelle, Sasquatch, Charlie, and Jules. You guys, seriously, thank you. I mean that. I'm just kind of blown away. We sold our first shirt. Yay! And it wasn't to me. It was actually to somebody else. I have a shirt. Jason has a shirt. So we're sporting the Ghosts and Bears podcast logo, which I love this logo, by the way. The more I'm working with it, the more I like it. It's just so simple, so clean, easily recognizable. It's just really fun. If you are interested in that kind of thing, you can either go to our website, ghostsandbears.com, ghostsandbears.com, and you will find everything there. There's a merch button, there's a support button, there's a listen button. They're all there. So you can check that out. Or you can go to Redbubble /GhostsandBears, and you can find our little shop there. Not just our podcast logo, but also the covers of my 2 books, one that hasn't even come out yet. Talk about exclusive. So you can do that, and whatever else you want to do. If you do feel some move to support us, I would be so grateful. Buy me a coffee /GhostsandBears will get you there, and we're really grateful. There's all kinds of little rewards there. One of them, we do a Zoom meeting once a month. We did that this month with Arwen and Danny, and I am so grateful that you guys showed up, because I had visions of me sitting there staring at the camera with my headphones on, feeling like a dork as no one else showed up. So thank you to the 2 of them for coming. At the time, there were only 4 people, so realistically, I could say that 50% of the intended audience appeared for the very first one. So That's a pretty good statistic, I'd say, if I do say so myself. Again, thank you. And also for the art. Oh my goodness, that was unexpected. I have just been loving the art we've gotten from people and really grateful for that. Again, it's a fun logo. I honestly think it's just a really fun logo to work with, and it has inspired people. So I'm really grateful for that too. I'm going to tell you why and how I got into ghost stories on our next episode. Only because this one's running quite a bit longer than I thought it would, and I'm excited to do that. And when I do, if you've got a story about that, I'd love to hear it as well. How did you get interested in ghost stories? That would be really neat to talk about. Next episode is going to be a special place to Jason and I. It's in Port Alice, British Columbia, on the northern tip of Vancouver Island. You can go ahead and Google map that now. I'll wait. Okay, and when you find it, you will find that it's a small town of 600 people, and the reason it's there is because of a pulp mill that has since gone belly up. It has had a very rough history through the 100 years or so it's been open. And now the town is kind of reinventing itself, and it's really kind of cool to be a part of that. Jason and I bought a little property up there as a holiday kind of property. We also put it on an Airbnb, so you want to stay in a haunted town? No, I'm just kidding. But it's up on Airbnb, but we go up as often as we can. And so this past week, we took some time off work, and we tacked it onto the weekend, and we headed up to Port Alice to get the real story of the mill, because I got to tell you, this is one of those ghost stories that didn't come from someone else. This is one where you go somewhere and you feel it, and you think there has got to be some kind of paranormal stuff going on here, and I would love to know what it is. And so that was our goal. And lucky enough for us, we met some people who were willing to talk about it. So I think it's going to be a really cool episode. We also took the drone up, got some pictures, got some video. Oh yeah, that's the other thing. We're putting videos up on YouTube just for laughs. I am learning as I go, so the videos are going to be challenging, but hopefully they give you a little bit of insight into where we are or where we're talking from. That's kind of the whole point of the pictures we're giving out for our supporters who are $5 and up. You're going to get like a little window on the episode to know where we are and who's there and what's going on and all those sorts of things. So it's just a fun way to be more immersed in the experience, I guess. This past week, I was also recording a story segment for episode 4. And wouldn't you know it, but in the middle of it, a seagull and 2 crows decided to have a fight right beside me. So I'm like, awesome. I think I might just leave it in because it was kind of funny and slightly ridiculous. And if anything sums up my life, that would be the phrase. So thank you again. I keep saying it and I sound like an idiot, but I'm just so grateful that you guys are with me and that you're out there and that you're listening. I am so grateful, and I am so excited about where we're going to go together. I really am. It's just so cool. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you've had an experience at Helmcken House or even in the museum, where I could tell you some stories from there too, at least 3, then I'd love to hear it. Please do tell me. I have indeed plotted out the next full year of episodes because I'm that much of a loser, but I'm just so excited about doing this. I want to be prepared. So if you hear something that rings a bell with you, send us an email, ghostsandbears@gmail.com. That's ghostsandbears@gmail.com. And I hope we get to hear from you soon, because we've got some cool adventures ahead. Just before we go, however, I do want to make a point of thanking Ed, who reached out to me. Ed has his degree in sound engineering, and not that I need help. No, I totally needed help. Ed came over, spent a couple hours with me, pointed out some settings, some little tricks and techniques. So if you are enjoying a better quality sound on this episode than you had previously, you can thank Ed for that, because he made that happen. I also have to say, I am amazed at our international audience. Honestly, that was such a fun thing to read. when I saw all the different countries represented, oh my gosh, that warmed my heart. The big ones, of course, U.S., Canada, United Kingdom, Australia, and then the other smaller ones who showed up for the party: Australia, Ireland, India, Germany, New Zealand, Sweden. And then we have our friends who are sitting all alone in their homes in these different countries: Belgium, the Philippines, Israel, Colombia, Iceland, Finland, the Netherlands. And if you're in any of those countries, tell a friend. Don't do this alone. You deserve better than that. But I do want to thank you for checking in with us, and I hope you come back. It was really hilarious. When I could see what countries people were listening from, I'm like, oh, this could be totally addictive, because I just think it's great. And again, thank you, everybody, for all your help and for your encouragement. Oh, my goodness, the encouragement has been incredible, and I'm really grateful for that. Thank you again for joining us. I want you to have a fantastic week, day, or for our British listeners, fortnight. And next time you're wandering around, remember, we've got the actual ghost stories with the actual history in the actual place. And hopefully, one day, that place will be with you. Take care.